and welcome to the Cincinnati Observatory YouTube channel. Today we are going to be talking about space rocks. My name is Natalia and I'm an educator here at the observatory, and today we're going to be doing a little science experiment. So today we are going to be making a comet. Now if you don't remember what a comet looks like, it looks a little bit like this. And so a comet is a kind of space rock, though it's not the only type of space rock. Can you think of the names of any other kinds of space rocks? If you thought of asteroids, then you are correct. So there are also asteroids, and there are even things called meteors or meteorites. Now the difference between these three rocks is that asteroids are mostly made out of metal and rock. Comets are made out of mostly ice and dust. And then meteors can be a smaller piece of either an asteroid or a comet, but then it is a space rock that falls onto the surface of the Earth. Now we're going to be mostly focusing on comets today. So something that really sets comets apart from other space rocks is that it has a really long, beautiful tail, and this is what we are going to be making in our science experiment today. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we do though, let's think about when we are in a science lab, say at school, what are some of the rules that you have to follow when you are doing a science experiment? A lot of times they'll have you wear closed-toed shoes. If you have long hair, they'll have you put your hair up in a ponytail, wear gloves if it's appropriate, and always listen to directions. Most of the ingredients that we have here today are ingredients that you could find in your own home, and they're very safe to use. However, you still want to make sure that you're always being very careful with everything that you're handling. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. I already have a few of the ingredients in the bowl already, but I'll go ahead and show you what they are. So every ingredient that we're going to be using to make our comet today is either an ingredient that actually is inside of comets in real life, or it represents something that's inside of comets because we can't go and travel to outer space to get whatever that ingredient is. And so we're starting off with this liquid here. I want you to look at it for a second and think about, what do you think this might be? You definitely have this in your house. If you guessed water, you are correct. So water is the first ingredient, and that's because in comets in real life, there is water, because comets are kind of like dirty space snowballs. And if you're gonna have snow, that means that you have water. And so I put water in this bowl already, and then I also put this right here. What does this look like? If you guessed soil, you are correct. But this is not soil that I got from outside. This is potting soil, which means I bought it from the store. So I want you to think for a second, why is it that I would buy soil if I could just go and get some soil from outside? What is it in soil outside that is not something that you would find in outer space? If you're thinking bugs, rocks, plants, those are all things that are in soil outside that you would never find in outer space. And so instead of using outdoor soil, we're going to be using potting soil instead. So this is going to represent the dust that is inside of comets. So I already put that in our bowl as well. And so now we're going to start adding some of these other ingredients here. So the next ingredient that we have is something that you would bake with. Some of you may be thinking, maybe flour or baking soda, and those are really good guesses, but this is actually cornstarch. And so the reason that we're using cornstarch is that when you bake with cornstarch in real life, it helps whatever you're baking kind of stick together. And we're going to be using this to help our comets stick together, because out in outer space, the thing that keeps comets held together is gravity. It's the same thing that holds you to the ground here on Earth. And so even though we have plenty of gravity here on Earth, I don't really have much control over gravity. I can't just pick up gravity and put it in this bowl if I wanted to. So instead, we're going to add some cornstarch. And we're going to add about 1 tablespoon. And add some of this. And it doesn't have to be super exact. As long as you're around 1 tablespoon, that's totally fine. So I'm going to mix that in there. So this is what it looks like so far. Not very impressive yet. It kind of just looks like some dirty water, but we still have plenty of other ingredients to add before we get to our final comet. All right, so our next ingredient is in this bottle right here. So it's a clear liquid, and this is something that you may find in your house. And if you were to open it and smell it, which remember, when we're smelling things in the science lab, we don't put our nose right up to it and smell it. Instead, we go like this, we waft. And so when you waft it, it smells pretty strong. This is actually ammonia. And if you smell this in real life, the very first thing that you might think of is your cat's litter box. And that's because ammonia is something that is in both animal pee and human pee too. But it's also something that you can clean with. And so we are going to use this today inside of our comet because comets in real life have ammonia in them. So I'm going to add it up to about 30 milliliters. And then I'm gonna pour that in there. I'm gonna go ahead, mix that in there. All right, and so now we're gonna add a few more liquid ingredients, and they all have the same thing in common, which is that they're all pretty smelly. So you may recognize what this is just by looking at the shape of the bottle. And so if you think that this is rubbing alcohol, then you are correct. And so we're using rubbing alcohol not because there's actual rubbing alcohol in comets, but because there's something called methane in comets. And we have methane here on Earth, but instead of being in liquid form, it's in the form of a gas all around us in our atmosphere. And we get methane from a lot of different places here on Earth, but it's kind of funny. One of the biggest places we get it from is when cows burp, which is really silly. But since I can't just go up to a cow and catch its burp in a bag and put it into this bowl, instead I'm gonna use a little bit of rubbing alcohol. So I have 15 milliliters of this, and then I'm gonna pour it into our bowl. There we go. All right, so our next liquid that we are going to be using, another clear, smelly liquid that you may have in your house. Vinegar is something that we are going to use today. And the vinegar is going to stand in for something called amino acids that are inside of comets. So this is something else that we're also going to do 1 tablespoon or 15 milliliters. There we go. Mix it up a little bit more. All right, so we only have 2 more ingredients left, and one of them looks like this. It's corn syrup. So we're going to be using corn syrup because comets in real life have sugar inside of them, which is pretty cool. Do you think that the sugar inside of comets makes comets taste good? I would think probably not, considering some of these other ingredients that we added in here. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and mix that in. All right, so we have one more ingredient left that we are going to add, but this one ingredient is gonna be the one that makes the biggest transformation out of any of the ingredients that we added to our comet. So I'll go ahead and have you take a look at what the before looks like. So our next ingredient is the only ingredient that you probably wouldn't keep in your house, and it is the only ingredient here that is not necessarily super safe to handle. So if you were to do this yourself, this is something that you would definitely have to let your adult do for you. So we have an ingredient here that is called dry ice, and before I am able to touch the dry ice, I have to put gloves on because dry ice is a little bit different from regular ice, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. So this is what dry ice looks like, and it looks like a block of ice, except for it has all of this mist coming off of it. And so the difference between dry ice and regular ice is that instead of being frozen water, this is frozen CO2. And CO2 freezes at much colder temperatures than regular ice does. So if you can remember, regular ice freezes at 32 degrees, but this freezes at negative temperatures. And so this is much, much colder, and you cannot touch this with your hands. So we actually have a lot of CO2 here on Earth, but just like methane, it is in the form of a gas all around us. It is in our atmosphere. So right now, I want you to breathe in really deeply, and then breathe back out. you just made carbon dioxide. So we breathe out carbon dioxide, and then trees love to take that carbon dioxide and turn it back into oxygen, which is pretty cool. But this is what it looks like when it's frozen. And all of this mist coming off of it is basically the CO2 melting. And so this is a process called sublimation, and it basically means that this ice is skipping the liquid stage altogether and going straight from a solid to a gas. And the reason that it's doing that is because it is so warm in here by comparison of how cold this is usually kept, that it's just skipping the liquid stage altogether. And so that is the reason that we have to handle this with gloves. And a lot of times you have to go to special places to buy this, because if you try to put this in your freezer at home, it would melt. Your freezer at home is not cold enough to keep this cold. And so we're gonna add this because since this is sublimating, this is going to create the tail of our comet, because when comets get closer to the sun, what starts to happen is they begin to sublimate, and that's what creates that really beautiful long tail, because the sun is really, really hot, and comets usually hang out pretty far away from the sun, the outside edge of the solar system. So let's go ahead and add our dry ice. So I have some in here that is already crushed up. Here we've got our dry ice, and we have about 473 milliliters of it. We are going to add this to our pot. All right, so as you can see, once we poured it into the bowl, it's actually sublimating a lot, which is pretty cool. And even though you can't touch dry ice with your hands without any gloves on, this mist that's coming off of it is totally safe to touch. And it's kind of cool because when you feel it, it's a little bit cool on your hands. And so, if you get really close to it, you might notice that it's making noise. It's actually bubbling. So I'm gonna stop talking for a second to see if you guys can hear the bubbling sound. All right, and as you can see, it's starting to form, but we're gonna let it sit there for another second so it can really all get stuck together and form our comet. All right, my friends, so our comet is ready. And this is what it looks like. So remember how I said comets are basically like dirty space snowballs? It's kind of what this looks like. And as you can hear, it's still making that bubbling noise. And you can see it sublimating. And it's kind of cratery. And then we have a few more comets as well that came out of this batch. Yeah, and so they're all different sizes, which is very accurate to how comets in real life are. Some of them are gigantic, and some of them aren't that big at all. All right, my friends, so now that we have made our science experiment comet, now we are going to look at some real space rocks. So over here, we have a few different meteorites, which means that they are pieces of either an asteroid or a comet that came to the surface of Earth. So there we go. That's really cool looking. But if you could hold this in your hands, you would be able to feel that this is a lot heavier than an Earth rock. And that's one of the ways that you can tell the difference between a space rock and an Earth rock, because a lot of meteorites are made out of mostly iron, and that makes them really, really heavy compared to a rock that you would find outside of a similar size. And then we've got a few that shows you what it looks like when you cut one of these open. Right there. And then we've got this right here. All right, my friends, thank you so much for joining us today to see some of our meteorites and to also help us make our comet. Definitely be sure to check out other videos on our YouTube channel, and also make sure to check out our website, www.cincinnatiobservatory.org. Have a good day.